Is the senior advisor for the Foundation of the Defense of Democracies. He's also the former director for countering Iranian weapons of mass destruction for the White House National Security Council. Mr. Goldberg, thanks for being with us. This tit for tat, it dates back decades when the CIA, for instance, launched Operation Ajax to overthrow the elected leader of Tehran and help install the Shah. That led to the Iranian Revolution and the American hostages. When does it end?
Well, I think it's important to reset and understand what is Iran today. Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran, the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism, an ideology that says death to America, death to Israel, and they build the capabilities to try to achieve that vision. We have active assassination plots against former U.S. officials, attempted kidnappings of U.S. citizens off U.S. soil. We just saw indictments rolled out today. Plus their missile program, their proliferation, fomenting conflicts, the nuclear program, let's not forget, and all of these terror groups, from Hamas and what they did on October 7th, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis raining down missiles on the Red Sea in Yemen, and now the militias from Iraq and Syria seeing what they can do to U.S. forces, 3 Americans dead here. So let's be clear-eyed. It's not sort of a tit for tat. It's good and evil. Really, and we, the United States, as a democracy, and our fellow democracies, have to hang tough and see this very clear-eyed for what it is, an expansionist, ideological, religious, fanatic government that wants to destroy the United States. In Iran's view, they're at war with us today, even if the president says we're trying to contain a war and not expand one.
Is there a diplomatic end to this? Because the last time diplomacy was tried, it was the Iranian nuclear deal involving the United States and the other major nations that signed on to it. The Trump administration scuttled that deal. Are we better off or worse off now because that deal is no longer in place?
Well, we were actually a lot better off during the era of maximum pressure sanctions, in my view. When we got out of that deal and put back all of our toughest financial sanctions, driving Iran's oil revenues towards zero, we started drying up the resources they have to foment all this chaos. It's only been since 2021 that we've seen a resurgence, not just in attacks on U.S. forces, by the way, 250 attacks now since January 2021, but also an acceleration of the nuclear program to an unprecedented level where Iran now sits on the nuclear threshold. And of course, when you get bigger budgets, if sanctions are relieved, if the budgets go up in Tehran, the budgets go up for all the terror proxies as well. And so as we start thinking about the response to what we just saw in Jordan, understand that our options are multifaceted. We have political options, we have financial, economic options.
So does that mean that you believe the only ending to this is an all-out war between Tehran and Washington in the West?
No, absolutely not. I mean, think about how Ronald Reagan handled the Soviet Union, a much larger power at the time, a nuclear power. We didn't have an all-out war, but we put economic pressure, we used political isolation and military deterrence against the Soviets, and we brought down the Soviet Union without firing a direct shot. That is the strategy that applies here. We can bring maximum economic pressure, dry up the resources, and make sure Iran knows they will pay a military price if they do what they just did over the weekend to our forces.
How concerned should Americans be about another foreign entanglement? Because keeping in mind the staggering cost of the Iraq war during the Bush administration caused the U.S. economy to melt down and is behind much of the debt that Republicans say they want to fix. You're talking about engaging Tehran and strangling them, and yet half of Washington says, drill, baby, drill. The other half says, let's go electric. Their lifeblood is oil. So how do we strangle Tehran without, first of all, cutting off our own habit?
Well, first of all, we can be for American energy and against terror sponsoring energy. This administration seems to have it backwards half the time, where we're against American energy, but we're okay with Iranian oil and Venezuelan oil, and even dirty Russian oil for the Chinese. But to answer your question, the answer is we've done it before. I have personally overseen a policy that took over 1 million barrels per day off the oil market, and it did not phase oil prices. We can put maximum pressure on Iran while working with our other oil-producing allies and investing in American energy to send signals to the market to reassure the market. That's not the issue here. The issue is whether or not we believe in appeasement of dictators and trying to buy them off, hoping that that tampers down bad behavior, or we believe in Reagan's
what is the
doctrine of
solution?
peace through strength.
What is the
We need
solution?
peace through strength.
You know, the hawks on Capitol Hill are saying that we need to do a military strike inside Tehran. There are other hawks on Capitol Hill saying we have to attack their oil infrastructure. Forget about history. What does America have to do to avenge these 3 American deaths?
Well, I'll give you 2 simple options off the start that I think the White House should be considering immediately. Number 1, close off all the sanctions relief that we've been providing to Iran over the last year. There are sanctions waivers the president can withdraw, closing down access to $10 billion of money out of Iraq, and starting to crack down on the oil shipments to China.
But the United
Number
States
2,
does not control the disbursement of those funds.
Well, the way that U.S. sanctions work, we threaten banks that control those funds. If they disperse the money, they get cut off from the U.S. financial system. And so right now, they're in Oman and Qatar, and if Omani banks or the Qatari banks were to process transactions, they would get hit with U.S. sanctions. They won't do that. So our sanctions will work if we enforce them. But on the military side, 250 attacks so far since January 2021, and we have never responded with a military strike against the IRGC, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps commanders who direct all these strikes. We've only hit the Arab militias that are doing their bidding. The president has to hit IRGC commanders the same way President Trump hit Qasem Soleimani in January 2020.
And when he hit Qasem Soleimani in January 2020, there was an attack on American forces in March of 2020. And that's what I was saying. This tit for tat goes back decades. And you mentioned cutting off the supply of the money. If we go after the Qatari banks, guess who doesn't negotiate with Hamas with regards to trying to solve the crisis in Gaza? It is a twisted web we weave.
Well, I disagree with both premises. Number 1, in 2020, you compare the number of attacks that year after Qasem Soleimani died to the number of attacks that started in 2021 when we started pulling back the sanctions. 78 attacks between January 2021 and March 2023 of the 250 we've seen over the last 3 years. But also look at the nuclear program. Iran started escalating the nuclear program when we came out of the nuclear deal. It stopped its escalations for an entire year after Soleimani was killed. They were afraid Donald Trump was going to hit their nuclear program. They only started escalating, and my have they escalated, in January 2021 when President Biden was coming into office. It does actually restore deterrence to go after the Iranians and make them afraid of U.S. power, which they are afraid of when we're willing to use it.
Richard Goldberg with the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Mr. Goldberg, thanks for being with us tonight.
You bet.
Coming up on Scripps News tonight, state and federal officials butting heads over a Texas border town. How Border Patrol is trying to overcome that deadlock in Eagle Pass. Plus, House